Hello, folks. You're listening to Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, where we bring you stories about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Our story today is about Katharina Thiessen, a midwife who practiced medicine in her southern Manitoba community at the turn of the 20th century. She endured and persevered legal prosecution because of her work. In the 1800s, Mennonite midwives played an integral role in their communities. Living apart from mainstream society and being self-sufficient were important values. Childbirth could be risky for both mothers and their babies. It was important to have someone in their own community to care for new mothers and help bring new life into the world. Midwives were highly respected. Becoming a midwife or lay doctor was one of the only public roles that women were encouraged to fill in Mennonite communities. Knowledge and experience were passed down from mother to daughter, or from expert midwife to apprentice. The best midwives could also provide medical care beyond the realm of childbirth. They could set bones, perform surgeries, and write prescriptions for medications. When Mennonites began migrating to Manitoba from Imperial Russia in the 1870s, they negotiated a deal with the Canadian government. Mennonites were allowed to hold land in common. This allowed them to build communities that were similar to how they had lived in Imperial Russia, with an emphasis on mutual aid, including midwifery and medical care. Katharina Thiessen was one such Mennonite midwife. She was born in 1842 in the Molochna colony in South Imperial Russia. When she was 18, Katharina traveled to Prussia to train in medicine, where she learned midwifery as well as naturopathic and chiropractic treatments. She then returned home to Imperial Russia, and in 1862 she married Abraham Karl Thiessen. In 1874 they immigrated to Peabody, Kansas. Katharina worked as a midwife, and her husband farmed. They came to Manitoba in 1885, lured by the promise of free homesteads. They settled in the village of Hoffnungsfeld, which was near the site of the future town of Winkler. Katharina once again set up practice as a midwife. Katharina was not only a midwife, but also a lay doctor. She could administer chloroform, amputate limbs, and write prescriptions for medications. She was so successful that at some point in her career, she had a house built just for her practice. It had a reception area, a pharmacy, an operating room, and rooms for overnight patients. Katharina was a lifelong learner. In the early 1890s, she traveled to Cincinnati, Ohio for further training at a medical college. While Katharina Thiessen was highly respected in her Mennonite community, she was not held in the same esteem by those outside it. Though she was in effect a practicing doctor, Katharina did not have a medical license. In the late 1800s, medical care in Manitoba and beyond was undergoing change. Scientific knowledge was becoming more important in the field of medicine. Childbirth was particularly targeted for medicalization. Doctors viewed pregnancy and childbirth as issues that needed medical intervention. To midwives, however, pregnancy and childbirth were natural processes. They observed and listened to their patients, intervening only when needed. But medical professionals began insisting that childbirth should be attended by formally educated physicians, not midwives and lay doctors. In 1871, Manitoba introduced the Medical Act, which prohibited unlicensed midwifery. It might seem that the obvious solution to this problem for Katharina would be to become licensed, but it wasn't that easy. The Manitoba College of Physicians and Surgeons controlled the licensing of medical practitioners. Members of the college were male, upper class. They had studied at medical school. They had particular views on what a qualified doctor looked like, and it was not immigrant midwives like Katharina Thiessen. Midwives represented a more traditional, pragmatic way of learning and practicing medicine. Their training was hands-on. They exchanged information and recipes with healers and midwives from other communities and cultures. They were open to gaining new scientific knowledge and skills from the medical establishment. The College of Physicians and Surgeons revered specialized scientific knowledge and formal education and was not inclined to provide medical licenses to such women. And in 1886, the Medical Act was amended to further restrict who was qualified to become a licensed member of the college. Despite this push for medicalization, Mennonite communities in Manitoba largely preferred their own midwives and lay doctors over licensed physicians for several reasons. Midwives were part of the communities they served. Mennonite midwives like Katharina spoke Low German and practiced the same faith. Many saw midwifery as a divine calling. Licensed doctors at the time were English-speaking outsiders. Midwives often had other means of financial support, so they could afford to charge less than doctors, if they charged at all. Sometimes they offered additional services after a birth, like doing chores and cooking meals. Midwives who were held in especially high esteem, like Katharina Thiessen, could also offer other medical care, like setting bones, performing surgeries, and prescribing medications. Licensed outside doctors who did not speak the language of the communities in which they practiced charged more for their services. They certainly did not offer to clean a new mother's house or cook a meal for her family. Although they had more formal training and scientific knowledge than midwives, they had far less practical experience with childbirth. Many doctors at the time completed medical school without ever attending a live birth. Despite the college promoting licensed physicians, Mennonites in Manitoba continued, on the whole, to seek treatment from their local midwives. In fact, midwifery remained so important to Mennonite communities in Manitoba that they took extra steps to ensure new midwives were trained. In 1892, Dr. Justina Neufeld came to visit Mennonite communities east of the Red River and led a 6-week course for new and prospective midwives. Dr. Neufeld was a well-known Mennonite doctor from Minnesota. She had visited Mennonites in Manitoba before. While Mennonites were carefully training new midwives to care for their communities, licensed doctors in the Winkler-Morden area were busy filing complaints against them. These doctors, members of the College of Physicians and Surgeons, had come to set up their practices in the new railway towns of southwestern Manitoba. The area was densely populated and, in their view, should have been an ideal place for a profitable medical clinic. But they quickly realized that they were facing competition from midwives and lay doctors like Katharina Thiessen. To the licensed doctors, unlicensed practitioners like Katharina, no matter how well trained or experienced, were, quote, quacks, unquote. Even worse, they were quacks who posed a threat to these doctors' incomes and careers. Midwives could charge less than licensed doctors because they had other means of support, whereas licensed doctors relied on charging fees for their entire income. When unlicensed midwives attended childbirths, the complainants argued, they robbed the licensed doctors of their income. Moreover, when a licensed doctor attended a birth, it was an opportunity for him to begin a relationship with a family who might regularly return for treatment over the course of many years. When a midwife attended a birth, she also robbed doctors of future opportunities. Licensed doctors in the Winkler-Morden area stressed such complaints to the College of Physicians and Surgeons in the 1890s. The doctors were not especially concerned about public health, which was the college's self-declared reason for existing. The doctors' issues were far more self-interested and were primarily concerned with the threat midwives posed to their own business. The college received many complaints from these doctors about many unlicensed midwives and lay doctors in Mennonite communities. They eventually attempted to prosecute Katharina Thiessen, along with another community lay doctor, Abraham Hebert. This proved more difficult than the college expected. The plaintiffs had trouble finding witnesses to testify against Katharina. She was integral to their community, and the college did not have a Low German translator. They also had trouble proving that Thiessen had breached the Medical Act, which specifically prohibited someone without a license to practice midwifery in exchange for payment. Now, payment was subjective. Some patients offered their midwives money as a gift, supposedly independent of any service the midwife provided. It took 3 tries, but the College of Physicians and Surgeons eventually succeeded in convicting both Abraham Hebert and Katharina Thiessen in the Morden court. In the spring of 1895, Katharina was given a fine of $50, which is worth about $1,500 today. Katharina's community rallied around her. The Mennonites were not happy with what they saw as an intrusion into their communities and the unfair persecution of a well-loved and well-respected midwife based on complaints from jealous doctors. They petitioned their MLA, Valentine Winkler, for help, and he listened. Winkler went to the Morden court and paid Katharina's fine for her. At the same time, he informed the College of Physicians and Surgeons that he would be setting out for Winnipeg, where he planned to introduce an amendment to the Medical Act to exempt Mennonite midwives from requiring a license. The college feared that if Valentine Winkler's amendment to the Medical Act succeeded, other immigrant communities would follow suit and hinder licensed doctors even further. The doctors who had submitted complaints against Katharina and her fellow midwives weren't very popular with the Mennonite community. They now had a reputation as interfering outsiders, jealous of Katharina's success and respected position within the community. That poor reputation had the potential to seriously damage public trust in the College of Physicians and Surgeons and to diminish support for licensed medical care. So, the college worked out a deal with Valentine Winkler. They would stop prosecuting Mennonite midwives and lay doctors who were practicing in their communities. In return, Valentine Winkler would not introduce his proposed amendment to the Medical Act. After this ordeal, Katharina Thiessen was free to continue her medical practice, and she did so successfully for another 15 years. In 1907, she partially retired in order to care for her husband after he suffered a stroke. After that, she sold patented medicines until her full retirement in 1909. She died of a stroke in 1915. During the rest of Katharina's career, some licensed doctors continued to lodge complaints with the college about her and Mennonite midwives. They were ultimately unsuccessful due to the deal between the college and Valentine Winkler. Midwifery in Mennonite communities began to decline in the early to mid-20th century. That's when Mennonite doctors began training and getting licensed by the college and setting up shop in their communities. Demand for unlicensed midwives and lay doctors shrank when Mennonites could go see a licensed doctor who was also one of their own. A century later, in June of 2000, the Midwifery Act legalized and regulated midwifery in Manitoba. Images of Katharina Thiessen and her medical practice are available on the Mennonite Heritage Archives website. To see some of these images online or to hear this episode again, go to mharchives.ca. If you have questions or comments about this program, email us at info@mharchives.ca. Join us again next week for a story about Wilhelm Entz, known to many as Big Bill. He was a storyteller in his own right. His slice-of-life anecdotes were published in the Steinbach Post for many years.
I'm Archivist Conrad Stace. This program is made possible through support from Golden West Radio and listeners like you. If you want to support this program and the work of the archives, you can find out how to do that on our website at mharchives.ca and click on Support.
This episode was researched and written by Kaylee Dyck. This entire program is supported by the Tales team of Graham Unruh, Kaylee Dyck, and Conrad Stace. I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back next week. Thanks for listening.